Okay, so this is now take 3. Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you guys so much for joining me. If this is your first time here, please like and subscribe. I know that you like my content. Join us. We're talking about racism and race. I'm going to get into race first because this is going to be focusing more on that and why that is important and why did I make quotation marks in my last video about interracial dating and swirling and all that good stuff. Because I feel like there are two sides. Well, there are two ways of talking about this topic, right? You can talk about it from the perspective of race being something that is a social concept. And I cringe when I think of this whole idea of everything being a social concept and there's no biology to anything. And people want to argue semantics about whether or not you're Black because you say you are, or because you look a certain way, or you fit a certain genetic criteria. Let's just give some context, okay? let's go with let's go with the science, shall we? Now, race in the human categorization is classifying humans into groups based on physical traits and or social relation. So that means to me that if you grow up in a society where we all act this way and we identify with each other because we look the same and we have come upon a social consensus that says this is how we act when we belong to this group of people, and that is what it means to be Hispanic. I'm just gonna get outside of black and white because not that it's gonna help, but people might come for me and say that that's not black and that's not black. The fact that people want to argue those parts of the line is making my point for me, actually. If you think that because you dress a certain way then you're black, or you talk a certain way then you're black, then you're limiting the experience of what it means to be someone of black African descent. And I say that is why I did the quotation marks, is because we are all different shades. We have many kinds of experiences. And sometimes when we are with our people, when we are with other Black people, we don't necessarily identify with every single way of being that those types of Black people identify with. And I'm sure that you can agree with me when you say that race is not just skin deep. There is a social part of this issue. There's a social part of this experience that we bring into our experience based on our attitudes about ourselves as well, that we are responsible for addressing, acknowledging, and even changing in our in the way that the world perceives us. And I can only speak for being Black and when it comes to that particular issue. And that's just my opinion as my Black African experience. But I'm sure that there are other people who have different kinds of experiences. My children, case in point, sometimes they feel more German than they do feel more Black. And that is as a direct result of growing up in Germany. But when we're home, you better believe that there are certain things that they tend to identify with more and understand more about themselves. And it is the same thing with dating. Like I said in the last video, date who you want, love who you want. I am really not interested. But of course, we have to be culturally sensitive to some of the experiences that people have on all in all ranges of life that are as a direct result of how we look. And I'm not going to be insensitive to say that racism is just a social concept and it's all in your head and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Although, and sometimes it kind of is, I've learned that the more you experience the world, the more you have to be open to what exactly racism is and what it is not. And so I want to talk a little bit about what racism is. It is the oppression of a people based on the social concept and the physical traits that I just got into. And it's based on oppressing people just like that, which in a way requires you to be in a certain level or position of power in order to do so. And since our world is so dynamic and there's so many different kinds of people who are in power and have the ability to oppress or exclude others from situations. I can think of so many instances where that happens. Racism is not mutually exclusive to just a particular race of people. Now, I will not be naming said people in this video because I know like it's going to help. People are going to come for me if I name specifics. But we need to start to really speak a little bit more with a little more self-awareness when we talk about things like racism, because one person is not mutually does not have the dominate handle on being racist. Now, another thing that I am very, very, very cringed out about is the whole idea of colorism. I hate when people talk to me about the lighter or darker complexion of my children's skin. All I want is for them to be healthy and happy and comfortable in who they are. I don't care about this one having green eyes, that one having blonde hair, or that one having brunette hair or red hair. But people are always so obsessed with that. And I understand that there is a part of that that is directly related to just natural curiosity and the fascination of what happens when two people who are on polar opposites of the genetic spectrum, let me just put it like that, because there's no good or bad, but that's what colorism does. It dictates that there's a certain outcome that people want when these two opposites come together. And I used to try to just ignore it and be like, this is not important to me. But what was more important to me is to let my children understand that they are beautiful, healthy human beings that should be able to enjoy their skin, but not in that concept, not in that way, but enjoy who they are and enjoy both parts of who they are. That they are just as much one thing as they are another, and they can embrace cultures, and they don't have to choose. Colorism is putting people on some kind of a scale, and this scale, unless of course it has something directly to do with the kind of sun cream you buy, because I'm just saying it's happened to me where I bought the wrong kind of sunscreen, just saying. Unless it has something to do with that, then it should not matter. And this is the concept that I had with another friend of mine who is also in an interracial relationship, but she's white and her partner is black. And she did not know that there is a whole science and movement behind black hair. And as a mother of a daughter who has to struggle with the exclusion of not having hair care products that specifically cater to black hair, this is an issue. It's a huge issue, and you need to be aware of said issue and be able to support your daughter in such a way, not to make it like a big, like, oh, you're so different, and people won't understand and they'll want to touch your hair. I actually encourage my daughter to encourage people to be curious about her hair, because that's just what it is. It's curiosity. It's not racism. That can be a whole video on its own. But colorism can affect the way people as parents raise their children if they're not sensitive to the kind of experience that their children are having. And especially if they get like negative, positive comments, I don't think that people pointing things out about how you look if you are mixed um, is always with the best intentions, and we have to be very aware of what our intentions are when we're talking about this. I experience this a lot coming from the Caribbean, as a dark skinned girl, being told things like you're cute for a dark skinned girl, or just a whole lot of other stuff that made me very self-conscious about being dark skinned. And ironically enough, it wasn't until I met my husband that it was like celebrated. And a lot of women have this experience who are a darker complexion, have this experience when they date outside their race. And it is what it is, like love who you want. But that is more the norm than it is the exception to hear those kinds of stories. And that is a point that we need to be bringing into consideration when it comes to how important is this? Like, really, how important is this? And is your racism that you're experiencing a self-fulfilling prophecy? I have developed the how do I say this? I've developed the understanding that people are appreciative of people who want to stand out, but also want to be open minded and accepting of cultures. And that is usually the better way to go about living anywhere, is to not always put yourself as some kind of a victim, but to try to understand where people are coming from as they try to understand you. And you have to be prepared, which a lot of people are not, and that's also okay, but have a little bit of self awareness and know that you're not ready for that life. And that's the reason why you don't date outside your race, not because you don't find other people attractive. That a lot of people are not ready and willing to be ambassadors of their culture. They're perfectly comfortable letting people think, or letting people believe, or believing that people don't like them and they're not interested in them. And it's just too hard to have to be the ambassador and to cover what it to carry what it means to be black or white in a culture that's not yours, meaning you're the minority and you're the face of your race, because that's just the way it is. If you live somewhere else and there is another other person that looks like you and you don't know each other, you might give each other a nod, or they might act crazy, and then everybody just look at you like, can you tell them something? Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that, like, we're not the same just because we look the same. But and that's a natural way of being, and people develop stereotypes around that. Some of these stereotypes we honestly fit into, and some of these stereotypes we don't. And it is our responsibility, in the spirit of getting rid of racism and getting rid of prejudice, to carry ourselves in the best light always, regardless of what race or social economic standards that you belong to, so that people have a more positive point of view when it comes to how they view you, us, them, we. And it is perfectly normal and natural for people to naturally gravitate to other people that look like them. But let's be honest about that. I gravitate towards this person. We have nothing else in common except that we share the same features or we share the same skin color. And I just feel safer like that because this says to me that this is familiar and normal and natural. That's a genetic, that's a biological, psychological way of being as human beings. Anything that's different is scary. Anything that's the same and looks familiar is more comforting and safe for us. And race in society is evolving, and evolving in such a rapidly um, great way that you will find that more people will be coming out and sharing their experiences because they're feeling more and more comfortable in their own skin, and people are willing to listen a little bit closer to what some of the issues are and celebrate our differences instead of pointing them out as something that should be ignored or diminished. I want to thank you guys for stopping by. This has been on my heart for a very long time. I hope that I've covered enough. I'm sure I will have some more critics and detractors in my comment section down below. Please, I welcome it all. Just, of course, be respectful about it. And if you can, stay safe and stay free.